The planet of Orax was not a world of soil and sea, but a sprawling planetary-scale hard drive, a silent monument to the cold logic of the Vaxian collective. The atmosphere was perpetually chilled to protect the vast cooling arrays that hummed deep beneath the silicon crust, and the sky was a dull, flickering violet, reflecting the endless streams of data being uploaded from across the sector. Every poem ever written, every blueprint ever drafted, and every cultural milestone of 1,000 species was funneled here to be archived. But space, even on a planetary scale, was not infinite. In the Vaxian mind, efficiency was the only virtue, and when the archives reached 99% capacity, the pruning began. To the Vaxians, history was merely data, and data that served no current utility was classified as obsolete biomass or inefficient memory. Elias Thorne was the only human on Orax, hired as a disposal technician because his species possessed a peculiar tolerance for the mundane and a physical dexterity that robots sometimes lacked when handling delicate, non-digital debris. His job was simple. He stood at the end of a massive conveyor belt where the physical remnants of deleted cultures were dumped before being incinerated. He was supposed to ensure the furnace didn't clog and to verify that no high-value minerals were being accidentally destroyed. The Vaxians looked at the piles of junk with clinical indifference, seeing only carbon, plastic, and metal. Elias, however, saw the ghosts of lives he would never know. For 3 years, Elias lived in a small pressurized hab unit, a lone human in a world of logical beings who communicated in rapid-fire binary pulses. The Vaxians didn't understand Elias. They didn't understand why he spent his meager breaks staring at the junk piles instead of entering a power-saving sleep state. They didn't understand the human twist, the irrational, deep-seated urge to find meaning in the discarded. It started with a small wooden carving of a 6-legged beast, its edges smoothed by the hands of a child who had lived 1,000 light-years away. It was marked for deletion because the civilization that made it had been extinct for a century, and its cultural utility was zero. Elias didn't throw it in the furnace. He tucked it into the pocket of his heavy work coveralls. Then came a handwritten recipe on a piece of yellowed parchment, detailing how to bake a starberry cake. Then a dried flower pressed between 2 sheets of transparent polymer, a gift from a lover whose name was no longer in the digital record. Elias turned the back of the incineration chamber into a secret sanctuary, a curator's vault hidden behind a stack of rusted coolant tanks. He wasn't saving these things because they were valuable. He was saving them because they were anchors. He knew what it was like to be far from home, to have nothing but a memory to keep the cold at bay. He thought of his own home on Earth, a place of messy, beautiful chaos, and he realized that the Vaxians were slowly deleting the very soul of the galaxy to make room for more spreadsheets. The logistical nightmare of maintaining this vault became Elias's primary occupation outside of his shifts. Every week, automated Vaxian audit drones swept the facility, scanning for structural anomalies or unauthorized biomass. Elias learned to hide his treasures within the hollowed-out casings of decommissioned filtration units. Using his knowledge of the station's neglected corners to bypass the drone's rigid search patterns, he knew that if he were caught, it wouldn't just be his job at stake. He would be expelled from the system, and these final remnants of forgotten people would be lost forever. He moved with the quiet endurance of a man who had learned that survival was not glamorous, but it was enough. A heart of the crisis arrived in the form of High Archivist Zyle. Zyle was the oldest living Vaxian, the one who had overseen the preening for 2 centuries. But Zyle was fading. The Vaxians called it the graying, a condition where the mind simply refused to process further data. Zyle had stopped communicating in pulses. He stopped eating the nutrient-dense pastes that fueled his logic circuits. He sat on his high dais, staring at the violet sky with eyes that held the resignation of a being who had realized that a world of perfect efficiency was a world of absolute emptiness. The palace physicians ran diagnostics. They checked Zyle's neural pathways and his nutrient levels, but found no broken parts to fix. They didn't realize that Zyle wasn't sick. He was grieving for a galaxy he had helped erase. One evening, Elias was assigned to clean the High Archivist's private balcony. He saw Zyle sitting there, his long, spindly limbs folded like a dead insect. Elias hesitated, then reached into his bag. He didn't have a medical degree or a seat on the council, but he had a piece of trash. He walked over and placed the small wooden six-legged beast on the table in front of the dying leader. Zyle didn't move for a long time. Then his single optic lens focused on the carving. He didn't ask what it was. He asked why it was there. Elias explained that it wasn't a data point. It was a toy. It was the feeling of a parent making something for a child so they wouldn't be afraid of the dark. He told Zyle about the recipe for the cake and the pressed flour. He told him that humans don't just collect things, they preserve the feelings attached to them. Zyle's fingers reached out to touch the wood. For the first time in years, the archivist's skin flickered with a warm, amber glow. He didn't eat because he was hungry for calories. He ate because Elias sat with him and shared a piece of stale human bread, a simple act of presence that defied all Vaxian logic. The bread was nothing special to the physicians, bread, cheese, and yeast, but to Zyle, it was a connection to a physical reality he had long ago categorized as obsolete. The news of Zyle's recovery sent shockwaves through Orax. The medical council demanded to know what biological enhancement the human had used. Elias was summoned to the central chamber, not as a worker, but as a defendant. Counselor Atharis, a Vaxian with sharp silver markings, led the inquiry. She accused Elias of medical negligence and unauthorized deviation from station protocols. "You have been treating this like a disease," Elias told the council, his voice steady. "But what if it's not broken? What if it's just shut down because it's overwhelmed by the coldness of your efficiency?" Elias led the council members to his secret vault. When the logical aliens saw the junk, they were horrified at the inefficiency. But Zyle stood between them and the human. He realized that by deleting the obsolete, they were deleting their reason to exist. Zyle testified that Elias had given him a reason to live, which was something the council's treatment plans had never provided. The council fell silent as the data from Zyle's recovery was displayed. Weight gain, normalized neural markers, and improved cellular function. Elias was appointed as the first director of sentimental integration. The pruning stopped. Instead of deleting history, the Vaxians began to build gardens of remembrance where the physical artifacts of forgotten lives were displayed. Elias proved that in a universe of cold data, the most powerful force isn't knowledge. It is the courage to offer what is yours, even when it's just a piece of trash, to someone who has forgotten how to feel. The contagion of empathy began to spread. Other Vaxian workers, those who had mopped the floors and maintained the servers alongside Elias, began to secretly bring him items they couldn't bring themselves to incinerate. They brought a torn piece of a colorful banner from a lost festival, a stone smoothed by a river on a dead world, and a recording of a song that no one else remembered how to sing. The coldness of the palace began to melt, not because the temperature changed, but because the disconnection was being healed by small acts of human kindness. He stayed on Orax not as a prisoner of a work contract, but as a guardian of the galaxy's heart, and sometimes, when the violet sky felt too cold, he would sit with Zyle and tell him stories about a little girl on Earth with red hair, reminding the oldest being in the galaxy that some things are too precious to ever be deleted. He realized that he had found something worth staying for, not for the pay, but for the connection. Elias Thorne did not cure the graying with medicine. He cured it with humanity. The story of the human janitor who saved the archives became a legend across the system. It was a reminder that we are not saved by those who have all the answers, but by those who are willing to stay. Eventually, Elias was joined by his daughter Emma, who brought her own trunk of treasures from Earth, old books, hand-drawn pictures, and a stuffed creature that smelled of home. Together, they sat in the gardens of Orax, teaching a race of logical beings that the most important data in the universe cannot be stored on a hard drive. It can only be felt.